Please welcome to the show, Dan Geltrude. Dan, thanks for being on. Interesting. I'm not surprised. It's almost like looting after a bad tornado, isn't it?
I didn't think of it that way, but yes, look, the cornerstone of fraud, and that's what we're talking about here, government fraud occurring, is that there is a lack of controls, and that's what opens up the door, Scott. So if we go back to what was happening 3 years ago. And look, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback this thing and look back and say, oh, the government was throwing money all over the place. But keep in mind, the government had shut everything down. So nobody could work. Nobody could do anything. So where was their money going to come from? So the government decided, well, we're going to make up for that. We're going to be the bridge. Okay, fine. But now you start sending this money out everywhere and you don't keep control over it. What do you think is going to happen? But the good news is the IRS, and they have sharp teeth, no question about it. They are clawing back this money, as you said, $3.2 billion and counting, and 100% conviction rate so far. I mean, that means that there's a lot of fraud out there, Scott, and we need to do what we need to do to get that money back.
It doesn't surprise me, number one. But number two, let me ask you a question. I just thought about this while you were speaking. Do you think, because they couldn't afford to have that take a long period of time because people needed money, right? They weren't allowed to work. They weren't allowed to do anything. So do you think they might have even taken that the attitude of, hey, let's just get it out there, and then we'll sick the dogs on the bad people later, but the good people need to have it right now?
Yeah, I think so. Look, the guys who were putting together that program, specifically Steve Mnuchin, who was Secretary of the Treasury at the time, he's a smart guy, and he knew exactly what needed to be done. And listen, given the circumstances of what we were looking at that time, no one had a crystal ball. They really did a tremendous job trying to put something together to help people. Great. But the shortcomings of having controls over where that money was going, that's another thing. So did they build that into the formula to say, listen, we know we're going to have fraud, but we don't have time. But at some point when the smoke clears, yes, we'll sick the dogs on them and see what we can grab back.
So now that they've grabbed some of this back, $3.2 billion is nothing to shake a stick at. I mean, that's pretty sizable. That's just for the CARES Act, though, right? I mean, there's more to go, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, everything that you look at related to how money was being sent out to different people in different forms, whether it was in the form of PPP or loans or unemployment, there was rampant fraud everywhere. So I think the IRS is going to be busy for quite some time. And when you talk about deploying your resources, Scott, this is a good thing for the IRS to deploy resources for. Go get this money back.
So what are we talking about here for penalties? I mean, has there been any information out there about how long these people or what they're having to do so far as restitution goes? What's happening?
Well, people, I mean, it all varies, Scott, but people have been getting jail sentences between 3 and 5 years, which is not a small amount of jail time. And of course, recouping that money and the penalties and fines and the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Because remember, that $3.2 billion, that's spread out over a lot of different people playing games here.
I bet. So then once we clean up the CARES Act, we're probably going to look at more and more things, and hopefully that number, that $3.2 billion, it sounds like it'll rise substantially maybe between now and then. And you're right. That's one thing that we're going to actually get some money back from, because we need to have it, and that's pretty rare that actually does happen. So I really appreciate that, Dan. That's great.